The Candlemaker's Curse, Part 1. Chapter 1, The Whispering Flames. The town of Duskhaven had always been a place of quiet unease, its cobbled streets twisting like veins through the heart of something ancient, something unseen. Fog clung to the rooftops even on clear nights, and the moon never shone quite as brightly as it should. At the heart of it all, nestled between a crumbling apothecary and a shuttered tailor's shop, stood a candle shop that no one remembered arriving. It had no name, only a sign above the door carved with the outline of a single flickering flame, and yet, despite the eerie silence that surrounded it, people came. They came because they had heard whispers of the Candlemaker, an old, hooded man with hands stained in wax and shadows that moved unnaturally behind his pale eyes. They came because they had desires that no ordinary means could satisfy. Wishes. Longings. Desperations that only the unnatural could grant. Sylas Blackthorne, warlock and scholar of forbidden things, had spent the better part of the last year tracking the origins of the Candlemaker's enchantments. Every tale was the same: someone would buy a candle, light it, make a wish, and for a fleeting moment, their desire would come true. But then came the price. A merchant's wife, who had wished for wealth, was found drowned in her own golden coins. A beggar, who had wished for warmth, burned alive in his sleep. A grieving mother, who had wished for her child's return, woke up to find a creature that wore her daughter's face, but had teeth too sharp and eyes too black. And always, the candle was found melted down to nothing but a pool of wax, the scent of something unidentifiable lingering in the air, something that smelled too much like burnt flesh. Tonight, Sylas stood before the shop's entrance, the cold autumn wind tugging at the hem of his dark coat, the brass doorknob oddly warm beneath his fingertips. The moment he stepped inside, the air changed. The scent of honey and spice curled through the dimly lit shop, but beneath it, something darker slithered, a whisper of charred bones and old blood. Shelves upon shelves of candles lined the walls, each one different from the next. Some were short and squat, others long and elegant, their wax shimmering in unnatural hues, deep crimson, sickly green, shadowy black that seemed to drink in the light. A single counter stood at the center of the room, and behind it, the Candlemaker watched him. The man's face was a mask of stillness, his skin pale as melted wax, his fingers long and bony, each nail curved slightly like claws. His hood was drawn low over his brow, but his eyes gleamed from beneath it, dull silver, like molten metal cooled too quickly. He said nothing, only tilted his head slightly, as if waiting. Sylas stepped forward, his boots barely making a sound against the wooden floor. "I've heard about your candles," he said, his voice steady despite the thick unease pressing against his ribs. The Candlemaker's lips curled, not into a smile, but into something colder, something that suggested amusement without warmth. "And yet, you have come." His voice was soft, like the scraping of parchment against bone. "What is it you seek?" Sylas let his gaze flicker to the candles, their wicks unlit, but still humming with a presence that felt too alive. He had prepared for this moment, had woven protective spells beneath his skin, hidden sigils inked in blood along the inside of his sleeves, but still, standing here, he could feel the weight of something watching. "Answers," he replied. "About what you sell." The Candlemaker moved, slow and deliberate, tracing a fingertip along the edge of one of the candles. "Ah. A man of knowledge, not of need." His tone was almost disappointed. "Tell me, warlock, do you not long for something? Power? Love? Time?" His eyes flickered, catching the candlelight like silver blades. "Everyone wants something." Sylas clenched his jaw. "And what do your customers pay for their wishes?" The Candlemaker's hand stilled, and for the first time, something shifted in the air, an almost imperceptible tremor, as though the shop itself had exhaled. "A fair price," he murmured, his fingers tapping the wooden counter in an idle rhythm. "They ask. I grant." The balance must always be kept. He turned then, his gaze locking onto Sylas with a weight that felt tangible. Would you like to see? Before Sylas could answer, the shop's lanterns flickered, and in the space between one breath and the next, the shelves transformed. Gone were the ordinary wax creations. Now, the candles lining the walls were different. Each one held something within its depths. A flickering shadow. A faint, trapped scream. A twisted, frozen face, barely visible beneath layers of wax. Sylas took a sharp step back, his pulse thundering in his ears. The Candlemaker watched him, his lips parting in that same knot smile. You wanted answers, he whispered. Here they are. And then, the candles began to whisper. Chapter 2, The Price of Flame. The voices rose in a hush at first, a murmuring tide of desperate whispers threading through the dim candle shop, slipping beneath Sylas's skin like cold needles. He could not understand the words, not fully, but their meaning clawed at the edges of his mind, pleas, warnings, agonized gasps half formed into speech. The walls seemed to pulse as if the very wood had become something living, something breathing in the darkness, and the candles, they were watching. Each wick unlit, yet trembling with a presence far too aware. The Candlemaker had not moved, had not spoken, yet Sylas felt his gaze, heavier than the weight of spellbound iron, pressing into him, studying him, measuring the depth of his fear. Sylas forced himself to steady his breath, gripping the hilt of the dagger hidden beneath his coat, not for an attack, but as an anchor, a point of reality amid the unnatural horror unfolding before him. What are they? He demanded, voice sharp, controlled, but not immune to the tremor buried beneath. The Candlemaker's lips barely parted, but the whisper that followed crawled through the shop like curling smoke. They are the cost. A single candle flared to life without flame, its wick igniting in a cold, blue glow, illuminating the distorted face trapped within the wax. A woman's features twisted in agony, frozen mid-scream, her eyes wide with terror that had not faded even in death. The glow deepened, and for a fleeting moment, the shop fell away. Sylas was no longer standing in the dim candlelit space but somewhere else, somewhere cold, damp, the air thick with decay and the acrid sting of burnt hair. A woman knelt before the Candlemaker, her hands shaking, her voice a rasping sob. Please, she whispered. I only want him back. The Candlemaker, unchanged, unmoving, held a single candle between his wax-stained fingers, its deep red hue pulsing like a heartbeat. Light it, and he will return, he murmured, his voice that same rustling of dry parchment, of forgotten prayers whispered in the dark. The woman hesitated, fingers twitching as they reached forward, doubt flickering in her tear-streaked face, but desperation won. The candle's flame flared bright as she whispered her wish, and for a moment, the world stood still. Then, from the darkness, something emerged, a shadow shifting in the form of a man, something that once might have been human but no longer was. His face was hers, his touch familiar, but his eyes, empty, black pits of endless hunger. He reached for her, and when his fingers met her skin, she screamed. The vision shattered like glass, and Sylas was back in the shop, his breath ragged, the scent of burning wax and something fouler clogging his throat. The Candlemaker tilted his head slightly, observing. Wishes must be paid for, he said simply. The balance must always be kept. Sylas clenched his fists, pulse hammering against his ribs. You trick them, he accused, his voice low, dangerous, laced with a power he barely restrained. You twist their desires into something monstrous. The Candlemaker did not deny it. Instead, he reached for another candle, this one smaller, almost delicate in its design, its wax a pale silver, etched with strange runes that pulsed faintly. They come to me knowing there is a price, he murmured. It is not my hand that writes their fate, it is theirs. They choose. And so do you. The candle in his hand shifted, melted and reformed before Sylas's eyes, reshaping itself into something eerily familiar. A sigil, one Sylas had seen before, carved into a gravestone, belonging to a name that should have been lost to time. His blood ran cold as recognition struck. No, he breathed, taking an involuntary step back. That's not possible. The Candlemaker's expression did not change, but there was something in his gaze, something knowing, something that pulled at the dark places of Sylas's past. You came here for knowledge, the Candlemaker murmured. But knowledge is never given freely. A warlock should know this best. He held out the candle, its silver wax gleaming in the dim light. Would you like to know who lit this one, Sylas Blackthorne? Sylas's breath caught, his magic coiling beneath his skin like a living thing, restless, agitated, seeking release. He should leave, should walk away now before the answers he sought became a trap he could not escape. And yet, he did not move. His fingers twitched at his side, the weight of the candle's presence pulling him toward it, whispering something silent yet deafening. He knew the moment his fingers touched the wax, he would see. He would know. And he would never be the same. The candle flickered, waiting. The Candlemaker smiled. Chapter 3, The Flame of the Past. Sylas hesitated, his fingers hovering just above the candle's surface, the silver wax strangely cool despite the eerie warmth radiating from within. His breath was slow, measured, but inside, his heart pounded with the weight of unspoken truths. The name etched in his mind, the sigil carved into the wax, both belonged to someone who should have been long forgotten. The past had no place here, and yet, it had found him. The Candlemaker's expression did not change, but the flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows across his face, making him look less like a man and more like something carved from the darkness itself, something older than the town of Duskhaven, older than the magic Sylas wielded. You want the truth, the Candlemaker whispered, voice softer now, more insidious, like a secret meant to be kept behind locked doors. The flame will show you what has already been written. Sylas curled his fingers into his palm, resisting the pull, the whisper of the candle slithering into his thoughts like a serpent. He had studied the old magics, learned the dangers of objects that could bind memory to fire, to wax, to fate itself. If he accepted this, if he touched it, there would be no turning back. And yet, curiosity was a warlock's greatest sin. His fingers brushed against the candle. The world around him shattered. The shop vanished in an instant, replaced by a heavy darkness, thick and suffocating, pressing in on all sides. Then, a spark, a single ember flickering in the void, stretching outward into fire, into light, until suddenly he was no longer standing in the abyss but in a dimly lit chamber, surrounded by the scent of burnt herbs and old parchment. Recognition slammed into him like a blow. This was his past, a moment ripped from the fabric of time, replaying itself before his very eyes. He stood in the doorway of a candlelit room lined with bookshelves overflowing with tomes of forbidden magic. A single desk stood at the center, covered in scattered scrolls, and at it sat a woman, her back to him, her head bent over an ancient grimoire. The flickering light of a single candle cast her shadow across the walls, stretching it unnaturally, warping it, as though something unseen lurked within it. Leora. Sylas felt his throat tighten, his entire body rigid as he watched her move, watched her trace delicate fingers along the runes carved into the candle before her. He had not seen this moment in years, had buried it beneath layers of silence and regret, but the wax had stolen it, preserved it, and now it was laid bare before him once more. He stepped forward, his voice caught between a whisper and a plea. Leora, don't. But she could not hear him. This was not a memory in which he could change the past, only watch as it unfolded, as it had always done. Leora murmured a spell under her breath, her voice soft, reverent, the language old, woven with power beyond even her understanding. The candle before her pulsed, its wax shifting, reshaping itself, just as the one in the Candlemaker's shop had done. Sylas knew what was coming next. He had tried to stop her before. He had failed. The candle ignited. The flame burned with an unnatural glow, too bright, too wild, flickering with something alive. Leora gasped, eyes widening as the magic surged through her, around her, the air itself trembling with its intensity. The runes along her arms shimmered, her magic fighting against something unseen, something vast. Sylas clenched his fists, watching, helpless, as the darkness around the candle deepened, twisting, stretching into something with form, with hunger. The shadows at the edge of the room peeled away from the walls, slithering toward her, drawn by the flame's call. "Leora," he shouted, though he knew she would not hear him, could not. She looked up then, her gaze locking onto something unseen, her lips parted, her expression frozen between awe and terror. And then, the candle's flame surged, swallowing her whole. The room dissolved in a blinding burst of light, and suddenly, Sylas was back, gasping, staggering, the weight of the vision slamming into his mind like a wave. The candle in the candlemaker's hand still burned, its silver wax untouched, but the warmth of it had seeped into his bones, curling around his ribs like unseen chains. The candlemaker watched him, head tilted, his silver eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Now you understand," he murmured. "The wishes do not vanish, nor do their debts." Sylas's breath was uneven, his hands trembling at his sides. He had known Leora's fate, had lived with the regret of that night for years, but what he had never known, what he had never suspected, was that she had been taken. Not by the magic itself, not by the chaos of a spell gone wrong, but by something else entirely. Something that had bound her essence to wax and flame. A candle. One of his candles. His stomach twisted, horror and fury clashing inside him like a violent storm. "Where is she?" he rasped, his voice raw, dark with barely contained power. "Where is her soul?" The candlemaker only smiled, slow, deliberate, knowing. "Still burning." He turned, motioning toward the endless rows of candles lining the walls, each one flickering, pulsing with the essence of those who had been bound to their flames. "Find her, if you can." Sylas's blood turned to ice. He had walked into this shop seeking knowledge, chasing whispers of dark magic, believing himself an investigator, an outsider peering into the abyss. But he had been wrong. He was not an outsider. He was already entangled in the candlemaker's web. And now, the hunt for Leora's soul had begun. Chapter 4, The Flickering Hunt. Sylas's pulse pounded like a war drum, his mind caught in the sickening weight of revelation, his magic coiling within him like a caged beast, restless and furious. The candlemaker's words echoed, wrapping around his thoughts like chains, still burning. "Find her, if you can." He swept his gaze across the endless rows of candles lining the shop's dimly lit walls, each wick unlit yet alive, pulsing with something unnatural, something stolen. His breath felt heavy in his chest, thick with the scent of old wax, of burnt offerings, of remnants of souls lingering in the air like whispers caught between worlds. The shop itself seemed different now, shifting as though it had expanded, the shelves stretching impossibly far, their heights vanishing into shadows. The light from the flickering lanterns barely reached the edges of the room anymore. The shop was growing. Or perhaps, it had always been endless. His fingers twitched at his sides, 1,000 questions gnawing at his mind, but only one mattered: where was Leora? His instincts screamed at him to strike, to unleash his power and force the answers from the candlemaker's throat, but the warlock knew better. This was not an enemy who could be overpowered. This was something old, something patient, something that had existed long before Sylas had even drawn breath. It thrived on deals, on choices, on the delicate balance between desire and consequence. Power would not win this battle. But knowledge might. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself, his gaze locking onto the candlemaker's unreadable silver eyes. "There are thousands of them," Sylas said, his voice measured, sharp despite the unease twisting in his gut. You expect me to search every single one? The Candlemaker did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned slightly, his wax-stained fingers trailing along the edges of a nearby candle, his touch slow, deliberate. The path to what you seek is always hidden until you truly understand what you are willing to pay for it. His voice was soft, almost thoughtful, as though he were merely an observer rather than the orchestrator of this twisted labyrinth of stolen souls. His fingers stopped over one candle, a small, delicate thing, its wax deep crimson, its wick untouched by flame. It was breathing. Not with lungs, not in any human sense, but the wax swelled and contracted in slow, unnatural pulses, as though the essence trapped inside still fought against its prison. Sylas took a step forward, but the Candlemaker moved first, his fingers snapping forward to grasp the candle and lift it from its place among the others. He turned it in his hands, the runes etched into the wax shifting slightly as though responding to his touch. Not hers, he mused, voice light with amusement. But close. His gaze flickered to Sylas. Tell me, warlock, what do you truly remember of that night? A flare of anger burned in Sylas's chest. He did not have time for riddles. He had seen Leora vanish, had watched helplessly as the candle she had crafted swallowed her whole. That moment had been seared into his memory, an open wound that had never healed, a failure that had haunted him for years. I remember enough, he bit out. I remember her scream. I remember the way the light swallowed her. I remember that I couldn't save her. His jaw clenched. And I remember that you weren't there. So how do you have her soul? The Candlemaker's lips curved, not into a smile, not into anything that could be mistaken for kindness. It was something colder, something almost pitiful. I did not take her, he murmured. She was given to me. The words hit Sylas like ice down his spine, a sickening chill spreading through his veins. Given? The idea was unthinkable. No one would have done that. No one could have done that, unless it had been written into the spell itself. A terrible thought slithered into his mind, unbidden, unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. Leora had been desperate. She had wanted more power, more knowledge, had reached for magic beyond her understanding. What if she had unknowingly offered herself in the process? Sylas shook his head, pushing the thought away. No. He would not believe that. There was another answer, and he would find it. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his magic bristling beneath his skin. Then tell me who did, he demanded, his voice sharp as a blade. Tell me who made the deal. The Candlemaker tilted his head slightly, watching him in that unsettling, measuring way, as though debating whether Sylas had earned the answer or not. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. The candle. Not Leora's, but one close to her, one tied to the same moment, the same event. A piece of the puzzle. A thread in the web. Sylas hesitated, knowing what it meant to touch it, to see. But hesitation was a luxury he could no longer afford. He reached out and grasped the wax. The moment his fingers curled around it, the world shifted again. Heat. Fire. Smoke curling in thick ribbons, wrapping around the stone walls of a forgotten chamber deep beneath the earth. The same place. The same night. But this time, the vision was not his. This time, he was not standing in the doorway, was not watching Leora from the shadows. This time, he was watching himself. His own figure, his own hands gripping the edges of the table, his own lips whispering a spell he did not remember speaking. The air crackled with energy, runes shifting on the floor in intricate, shifting patterns of power. And then, another figure. A shadow in the room. Someone standing just outside the ring of candlelight, unseen, unnoticed. Whispering. Sylas's breath hitched. He knew that voice. The vision twisted, pulling him closer, closer, until he could see. The shadow stepped forward, into the dim glow of the candlelight, revealing a face Sylas had not seen in years. A face he had trusted. A face that should not have been there. His breath left him in a ragged exhale. Cassiel. The name rang in his skull like a bell, a cruel and mocking reminder of the past. Cassiel, his mentor, his ally, the one who had taught him how to wield magic when no one else would. Cassiel, who had sworn to guide him, to protect him. Cassiel, who had stood there that night, unseen, unnoticed, and whispered the spell that had sealed Leora's fate. The vision shattered. Sylas reeled back, gasping, the candle still clutched in his shaking hand. The Candlemaker watched him, unblinking, waiting, as if he had always known what Sylas would see, what he would learn. Sylas's magic crackled at his fingertips, a storm barely contained, rage clawing at the edges of his control. Cassiel had betrayed them. Cassiel had made the deal. His teeth clenched, his voice a quiet, deadly promise. Where is he? The Candlemaker exhaled, the faintest trace of satisfaction curling at the edges of his expression. Closer than you think. The flames around them flickered. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5, The Ashen Mark. The candle in Sylas's grip pulsed, its wax unnaturally cool against his skin despite the fire still flickering within its depths. His breath came slow, heavy, every heartbeat drumming a furious rhythm against his ribs, the revelation of Cassiel's betrayal unraveling something deep inside him, something cold, something jagged. The shop felt different now, heavier, as though the air itself carried the weight of his fury. The Candlemaker stood motionless, watching him with that same knowing gaze, his silver eyes unreadable, the flickering candlelight dancing over his pale, wax-streaked fingers. Sylas clenched his jaw, his grip tightening on the candle. If he's close, he said, voice low, controlled despite the storm raging beneath his skin, then tell me where. The Candlemaker exhaled slowly, his fingers brushing against another candle on the shelf beside him, his touch idle, contemplative, as though he had all the time in the world. Your past, he murmured, was never as hidden as you believed. But if you wish to find him, warlock, you must first understand why. His fingers trailed along the wax, and the candle flared, a deep, haunting blue, its flame casting distorted shadows along the shop's warped walls. A thread of magic wound itself into the air, curling toward Sylas, wrapping around his wrist, tugging him forward. He resisted the pull, but his skin burned where the energy touched him, a tether latching onto his very essence. The candle wanted him to see. Sylas inhaled sharply, his teeth gritted, but he did not fight it. He let the magic take hold, let the vision drag him under. The world twisted. Darkness folded around him like ink spilling across parchment, and then, fire. It roared, high and furious, black smoke curling into the sky, the scent of burning wood and scorched earth thick in the air. The stone walls of an ancient sanctuary crumbled under the weight of unseen forces, its grand, towering arches now fractured ruins, its sacred runes shattered and bleeding red light. Sylas knew this place. He had not seen it in years, had forced himself to forget it, but it had once been his home. The hidden hall of warlocks, the last refuge of those who sought magic outside the reach of the so-called sacred orders. And now it was dying. Figures moved through the ruins, their cloaks billowing in the heat of the flames, their voices drowned beneath the destruction. But one voice cut through. Hold the circle, do not break the seal. Cassiel. Sylas turned sharply, his vision narrowing, locking onto the warlock standing at the heart of the chaos, his form draped in dark robes lined with sigils that pulsed with golden light. His hands were raised, magic weaving between his fingers in twisting arcs of raw power, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hood. But Sylas could see the truth in his stance, in the way his magic pulsed, not in defense, not in desperation, but in control. The attack had not come from an outside force. It had come from within. A sickening realization settled in Sylas's chest like a lead weight. The sanctuary had not simply fallen. It had been sacrificed. Cassiel's lips moved, his voice steady despite the carnage around him, his incantation precise, deliberate, the words winding through the air like chains tightening around a throat. Sylas strained to hear them, to understand, but something was wrong. The magic was twisted. The sigils burned against the stone, glowing too bright, too unstable, and at the center of it all, a mark. A single, ashen sigil etched into the floor, its shape a perfect mirror of the one carved into the candle Sylas had touched back in the Candlemaker's shop. This wasn't just a massacre. It was a ritual. And Cassiel had been the one who completed it. Sylas's breath hitched as the magic surged, the runes flaring with blinding light. The air rippled, something unseen awakening beneath the surface, something shifting, something breaking free. And then, Cassiel turned. His gaze locked onto Sylas, as though he could see him, even across time. A slow, knowing smirk tugged at his lips. And then he spoke. "You were never meant to know, Sylas." The vision snapped. Sylas staggered back, the world tilting as he was pulled violently back into reality, the candle shop rushing around him in a blur of shifting light and shadow. His breath came fast, his pulse hammering against his skull, his magic seething. The candle in his hand was cracked, fine fractures splintering across its wax surface as though it had barely contained the weight of what it had revealed. His grip was shaking. His mind reeled. The sanctuary's destruction, Leora's fate, the Candlemaker's involvement, it all led back to Cassiel. And Cassiel had known. The Candlemaker watched him in silence, unflinching, his silver eyes reflecting the flickering flames. The air between them was thick, charged with something unspoken, something inevitable. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer now, almost gentle. "Now you understand," he said. Cassiel's betrayal was never simply personal. It was designed. He did not just sacrifice Leora. He did not just sacrifice your home. He sacrificed everything. And he has not stopped. Sylas forced himself to steady his breathing, to lock the fury clawing at his ribs beneath layers of control. There would be time for anger. But first, he needed answers. He straightened, his voice low, steady despite the rage curling beneath it. "Where is he?" The Candlemaker held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he raised a hand, his fingers splaying open like a delicate invitation. "His mark is already upon you," he murmured. "Follow the ash." Sylas frowned, the words like a whisper in the back of his mind, shifting, twisting into something he could feel. He glanced down, and his blood ran cold. A faint ash-colored sigil had begun to form along the skin of his wrist, the same mark that had been etched into the ritual floor. A brand. A tether. A silent calling card left by Cassiel himself. The hunt was no longer a choice. It had already begun. Chapter 6, The Mark of the Betrayer. Sylas stared at the ashen sigil coiling along his wrist, its edges shifting as though written in smoke rather than ink, its shape identical to the mark that had been burned into the stone of the fallen sanctuary. His breath came slow, measured, though his veins burned with fury beneath his skin, his magic alive with the weight of the revelation. Cassiel had marked him. Not now, not in the candle shop, not through the Candlemaker's tricks, but long ago. The brand had been waiting, dormant, hidden beneath the layers of time and memory, and now that he had uncovered the truth, it had awakened. Sylas flexed his fingers, expecting pain, but there was none. The mark did not burn, did not sting like a curse, did not pulse with malevolence like a binding spell. It simply was. It sat beneath his skin, silent, waiting, a thread leading back to its creator. Cassiel. The man he had once trusted. The man who had orchestrated the deaths of their kin, the destruction of their sanctuary, the sacrifice of Leora. Sylas swallowed against the tide of rage swelling in his chest, his pulse steady even as his thoughts raced. This was no mere brand. This was a summon. A message. An invitation. The Candlemaker watched him with that same quiet amusement, his silver eyes gleaming in the flickering candlelight. His fingers trailed idly over the nearest shelf, moving from one candle to the next, his touch almost absent-minded, as though this moment had already played out in 100 different ways, and he was merely watching the inevitable unfold. "He knew you would come," the Candlemaker murmured, his voice like the hush of dying embers, soft but unyielding. "You were always meant to follow the path back to him. And now he has ensured that you will." Sylas's jaw clenched, the weight of the words pressing against his ribs like a tightening vice. He had spent years searching for answers. Years believing Cassiel was dead, that his betrayal had been buried beneath the ruins of their past, that Leora had been lost to an accident rather than a calculated offering. Now, he knew better. Cassiel was alive. Cassiel had always been alive. And worse, Cassiel had been waiting for him. Sylas exhaled slowly, forcing the storm inside him into temporary silence, the practiced discipline of a warlock who had long since learned that rage without control was simply another form of ruin. He lifted his gaze, his magic simmering beneath his skin, dark and sharp as a blade ready to be drawn. "Where does it lead?" he asked, his voice as cold as the air between them. The Candlemaker tilted his head slightly, studying him with something like quiet satisfaction. "Where it always would have," he murmured. "To the place where all debts must be paid. To the place where she burns." A flicker of something raw twisted in Sylas's chest. Leora. The thought of her soul trapped in one of these cursed candles, stolen and bound in fire, left to flicker and fade for eternity, no. He would not let her remain here. He would find her. He would break whatever contract had sealed her fate, would burn this entire place to the ground if he had to. But first, he needed to find Cassiel. Needed to rip the answers from his throat and ensure that he never played the game of betrayal again. The sigil on his wrist pulsed faintly, and Sylas felt it, the pull. It was subtle, a whisper of energy woven into his very blood, an invisible thread tightening in his chest, urging him forward. His lips curled in a grim, humorless smirk. "So he left me a map," Sylas muttered, flexing his fingers as the brand shimmered faintly against his skin. "How considerate." The Candlemaker did not smile, but there was something akin to approval in the way he inclined his head. A warlock who does not know he is being hunted makes the finest prey. He stepped away from the shelves, his long fingers folding together, wax-streaked and ancient. "Do you wish to walk the path?" Sylas's lips parted with the instinctive answer, "Yes, of course, yes," but something stopped him. His magic flared against his ribs, instinct warning him that nothing given by the Candlemaker came without cost. His fingers twitched at his side, his mind already calculating, already unraveling the trap laid before him. "And what do you get from this?" Sylas asked, voice sharp, measured, unwilling to play a fool. "You always trade in prices." "What's mine?" The Candlemaker's expression did not change, but the air around them grew heavier, the dim candlelight stretching, flickering in unseen drafts. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Too quiet. "I have already taken my share," he said simply. The words sent a slow, crawling chill down Sylas's spine, not because he did not understand them, but because he did. His grip on his own control tightened, his magic flaring slightly at his fingertips before he forced it back into silence. The candles. The vision. The truth. Sylas had already lit the flame. He had already seen. The Candlemaker had not needed a deal. Sylas had given him what he wanted the moment he had stepped inside the shop. A breath left him, slow, controlled. It did not matter. He had what he came for, and the hunt was already set in motion. He lifted his wrist, watching the ashen mark shift faintly, waiting, anticipating. He had spent years chasing ghosts. Now, for the first time, he had a direction. A path. And at the end of it, Cassiel. Sylas turned on his heel without another word, his boots barely making a sound against the wooden floor as he strode toward the door. The shop did not stop him. The walls did not shift to trap him, the shadows did not stretch to pull him back, the Candlemaker did not call him with more riddles or whispered warnings. The shop had given what it wished to give. And so had he. As Sylas reached for the door, a final whisper curled through the heavy air behind him, slithering between his ribs like a secret buried beneath the weight of wax and flame. Beware the second betrayal, warlock. Sylas's fingers paused on the brass handle, the cold metal warming beneath his touch. He did not turn. Did not acknowledge the words. Did not let them take root in his mind. He already knew betrayal. He stepped through the door, and the cold air of Duskhaven streets swallowed him whole. The door behind him vanished. The sigil on his wrist burned softly. The path had been set. And Cassiel would soon learn, he was no longer the only one who knew how to play the game. Chapter 7, The Path of Ash and Blood. The streets of Duskhaven were cloaked in fog, thick tendrils curling around the buildings like spectral hands reaching from the abyss. The air was damp with the scent of rain and stone, but beneath it, beneath the ordinary weight of night, the magic lingered. Sylas could feel it, an undercurrent of power threading through the cobbled streets, a whisper of something unseen, something watching. His wrist still burned with the mark Cassiel had left, pulsing in slow, rhythmic waves, as though it were a living thing, a silent whisper urging him forward. He exhaled through his nose, steady, his boots cutting through puddles as he moved through the slumbering city, his mind turning over the pieces of the puzzle the Candlemaker had given him. Cassiel had betrayed them. Cassiel had sacrificed the sanctuary. Cassiel had marked him long before Sylas had ever realized it. The weight of it settled in his chest like a stone, a slow, creeping rage curling in the spaces between his ribs, but he forced it back, swallowed it whole. Rage was useless without direction. And now, for the first time in years, he had one. The mark on his wrist burned again, and as he glanced down, he saw the edges of it shifting, tendrils of ash-gray magic twisting beneath his skin, curling like smoke, moving as if alive. It was leading him, tugging him along an unseen path, one that did not exist in the physical world but was etched into the fabric of magic itself. He rolled his shoulders, flexing his fingers as he let his magic reach out, feel the pull. It was not a destination, not yet. It was a thread. A single, delicate thread woven into the city, one he had to follow before it vanished. He moved faster, slipping through Duskhaven's winding streets, past shuttered windows and towering spires, the lamps flickering in the darkness as if they, too, could sense the magic shifting in the air. Every step was guided by the pulse at his wrist, each turn a whisper in his bones, a call he did not yet understand but could not ignore. He passed through the merchant district, past the hollow ruins of old temples long abandoned to time, past the crumbling remnants of places where power had once been worshipped and then forgotten. And then, the city ended. The buildings fell away, the stone streets vanishing into a landscape of ruin. Broken archways jutted from the earth like ribs of a long-dead beast, staircases leading to nowhere, shattered foundations left behind by a past Duskhaven no longer claimed. The Wraith Quarter. A place where the city had burned itself out centuries ago, where no one lived, where even thieves and beggars refused to tread for too long. The shadows here were wrong, stretching too far, whispering with voices that did not belong to the living. And at its center, the mark led him onward. Sylas slowed, his breath steady, his magic simmering just beneath his skin, waiting. He had been here before, long ago, when he had first begun hunting answers, but the Wraith Quarter had given him nothing then, only silence, only shadows. But now it had something to show him. His boots crushed brittle stone as he stepped across the threshold of the ruined district, his fingers twitching at his sides, his senses widening, stretching into the fabric of the space itself. The world shifted. Not physically. Not in a way the ordinary eye could see. But Sylas could feel it. A weight settling over the air, the pressure of something vast, something hidden. He exhaled slowly. Cassiel had been here. The magic in his wrist flared sharply, and suddenly, the world lurched. A pulse of energy surged beneath his feet, rippling through the ruins like a shockwave, twisting the air itself, bending the space between moments. A trap. Not one of steel and spring-loaded mechanisms, not one meant for the body, but for the mind. The very magic guiding him snapped shut like a vice, and Sylas barely had time to murmur a counterspell before the world shattered around him. He was no longer in the Wraith Quarter. He was somewhere else entirely. The air was thick, humid, carrying the scent of charred incense and burning wax. The walls were lined with stone, blackened with age, the symbols carved into them pulsing red. Blood magic. Ancient. Forbidden. Binding. Sylas exhaled slowly, his body tense, but his mind sharper, his pulse steady despite the suffocating pressure of magic coiling through the room. He had walked into the first layer of Cassiel's web. A summoning chamber. A ritual hall long abandoned, yet still active, still alive. The runes on the walls did not flicker with time, they burned with purpose, set in motion long before he had arrived, waiting for him to take the first step into Cassiel's game. Sylas's fingers twitched at his sides, but he did not move further. He was being watched. And then, from the darkness, a voice. "Still following my breadcrumbs, Sylas?" The sound slid through the chamber like smoke, curling around him, familiar and cold, edged with amusement. Sylas's breath slowed. His magic did not lash out, not yet. Not until he knew exactly where Cassiel stood. "I thought you were dead," Sylas said, his voice steady, even, despite the slow fire burning in his blood. Cassiel laughed softly, the sound like the echo of a blade being drawn. "You thought many things." Sylas shifted slightly, his muscles coiled, every instinct telling him to move, to strike, to attack, but he didn't. Not yet. Not until he saw him. Cassiel had set the trap. That meant he had the advantage. For now. "I saw what you did," Sylas murmured, testing the weight of the air around him, the tension in the runes, the lie hidden in the darkness. "I saw the ritual. The sanctuary. I saw Leora burn." Silence stretched between them, thick and humming. And then, Cassiel stepped forward. The shadows peeled away like old skin, revealing a figure draped in black, his face sharp, elegant, his eyes unnatural. They had once been the same as Sylas's, dark and keen, but now they burned with something else. Something carved from magic itself, something that did not belong to mortal men. Cassiel smiled slowly, tilting his head as if assessing an old friend, an old rival, an old piece of unfinished work. "Then you finally understand," Cassiel murmured. Sylas's fingers curled into fists. "Not everything." Cassiel's smile deepened, something knowing flickering behind his gaze. He had been waiting for this. For this exact moment. For Sylas to find him, for Sylas to step into the game. The first trap had been set. But Sylas would not be the one to break first. The sigil on his wrist burned again, deeper this time, sinking into his bones. Cassiel's mark. A brand. A tether. A second betrayal. Sylas did not blink. "Then let me finish what I started." Cassiel lifted his hand, and the world collapsed into darkness. Chapter 8, The Abyss Beckons. Darkness swallowed the world whole, thick and absolute, pressing in from all sides like a living thing. Sylas felt the floor vanish beneath him, the weight of existence shifting, twisting, dragging him downward. His magic bristled in his veins, crackling against the unseen force wrapping around him, but the moment he tried to cast, it failed. Not broken, stolen. His power was still there, buried beneath layers of something ancient, something designed to smother, to suppress, to consume. A trap. A prison. A crafted descent. The fall stretched longer than it should have, time unraveling in the abyss, minutes stretching into something weightless, untethered. Then, impact. His boot struck solid ground, his body still intact, but the world had changed again. He inhaled sharply, forcing his muscles to remain still, forcing his heartbeat to slow, forcing his senses to reach beyond the suffocating blackness. He was somewhere. Not the Wraith Quarter. Not the ruined sanctuary. Not even within the echoes of Cassiel's last known stronghold. Somewhere else entirely. A low hum pulsed through the air, a slow, rhythmic vibration, deep and resonant, like the heartbeat of something impossibly large. It was not sound, not truly, it was felt. A presence that pressed against his ribs, a pressure beneath his skin, a pull. And then, light. Not natural. Not gentle. A flickering red glow bled into existence, carving jagged shadows along towering, crumbling walls of obsidian stone. The space was vast, a hollowed ruin of something that had once been a temple. But not to the gods. Not to anything divine. Sylas exhaled slowly, his breath misting in the cold air. A layer of frost coated the cracked floor beneath him, but the heat of unseen flames flickered in the distance, the strange duality setting his instincts on edge. His wrist ached, the mark Cassiel had left pulsing with slow, deliberate intensity, syncing with the rhythm of the unseen heartbeat filling the space. He knew better than to touch it. He was being called. The brand was reacting to something ahead. Something waiting. Something expecting him. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, echoing in the silence. Sylas remained still, his breathing steady, his muscles poised for movement, for reaction. His fingers twitched, magic burning beneath his skin, waiting for release. The suppression was still there, but it was thinning. He had fallen into a cage, but it was not yet locked. And then, Cassiel emerged. The flickering red light cast deep shadows over his form as he stepped forward, his dark robes flowing like smoke, his features unchanged by time, save for his eyes. They gleamed unnaturally in the dim glow, twin embers burning from within, their depths unreadable, endless. He moved with precision, his presence controlled, effortless, like a conductor walking into his own symphony. Sylas did not move, did not speak, did not let the weight of the moment settle into him. This was not a reunion. This was not an old betrayal revisited. This was a war that had waited too long to begin. Cassiel tilted his head slightly, studying him, the way one might observe the last piece of an intricate game falling into place. And then, he smiled. Not cruel, not mocking. Something worse. Something patient. Something that had always known this moment would come. You followed the path, Cassiel murmured, his voice smooth, edged with amusement. Good. I was beginning to think you wouldn't. Sylas inhaled slowly, his eyes never leaving Cassiel's face. You set the path, he replied, voice even. Measured. He would not give Cassiel the pleasure of seeing anger. Would not let him taste satisfaction at having led Sylas exactly where he wanted. Cassiel's smile deepened, his fingers curling slightly at his sides, a flicker of red magic shifting beneath his skin. You always wanted the truth, didn't you? He mused, his voice laced with something dangerous, something that threatened to unearth the very ground Sylas stood upon. You searched for years. You unraveled every thread. And here you are. Sylas flexed his fingers, every muscle coiled, his pulse a steady thrum beneath his skin. Waiting. Cassiel was speaking in circles, speaking in calculated patience. It meant something. It was stalling. Where is she? Sylas asked, his voice steady, but the fire beneath it undeniable. Cassiel exhaled, almost as if he had expected the question, almost as if the answer did not matter. Leora? His tone was mocking. I would have thought the Candlemaker gave you that answer already. Sylas's fists clenched at his sides. Cassiel chuckled softly, the sound slipping into the chamber like silk over steel. She was meant for something greater than what she was, he continued, his gaze gleaming in the dim light. You always saw her as a victim, didn't you? A lost soul in need of saving. His head tilted. But tell me, Sylas, have you ever wondered what she wanted? A cold weight settled in Sylas's chest, creeping into his ribs like something dead and rotting. Cassiel's expression sharpened. Did it never cross your mind that she was willing? The air thickened. Sylas's magic surged violently, cracking beneath his skin, but he did not release it. Not yet. He wouldn't let Cassiel control the moment. But the words sank in, lodged into his mind like a blade twisting in slow, excruciating precision. Willing. No. Impossible. Leora had not known. Leora had not chosen. She had been stolen. Cassiel saw the flicker of doubt, the briefest hesitation in Sylas's silence, and he pressed. She wanted power, Cassiel murmured, stepping closer. She wanted knowledge. She wanted more than she was ever meant to have. Just like me. Just like you. He exhaled, the shadows deepening around him. The only difference between us, Sylas, is that I accepted the truth before you did. Sylas's breathing remained steady, controlled, but his magic hissed. Where is she? He repeated, voice sharper now, cutting. Cassiel smiled again. Still burning. The words hit him like a strike to the ribs, but before Sylas could react, before he could force another answer from Cassiel's throat, the air shattered. The runes on the walls flared, their red light surging into something vast, something unseen, something summoned. Sylas moved, but the floor beneath him broke. The chamber lurched, the walls splintering, and then, fire. Not ordinary fire. Not magic. Something older. Something hungry. The space around them twisted, burned, shifted, folded into something else. Cassiel had set the stage. And now, the real game was beginning. Sylas gritted his teeth, his magic roaring back to life, ready. Let him burn. He would burn his way through.
Every story has an ending. But some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.